Bro, let's talk Buatsi versus Smith. Now that Callum's won, what's the future looking like for both contenders?
So man, listen, that was a great fight. That was a very important fight for the light heavyweight division. That's contention for, potentially being in line to face the winner of the main event. But man, listen, for Buatsi, unfortunately, that was a tough defeat to take. He was in a very strong position. There were talks of obviously him going on to fight for a title at some point. That was his first defeat in his pro career to Callum Smith, who was always going to be a dangerous opponent. But with that, he goes back to square one. He throws him back down the pecking order. He'll probably have to go and fight Anthony Yarde, which is a fight that's been called for with the British public for a while now. They'll probably have to settle business there, and then hopefully he can rebuild himself. But based on that performance, I worry for him for a number of reasons. Callum Smith, wow, what a career for the Smith family, man, honestly. He was all but written off. It was kind of like there was talks in terms of his career kind of winding down, talks of retirement. Did he really have the desire, the hunger? And he put in a solid performance. With Callum Smith, obviously he's won world titles before, but in that division, again, he came up short against Beterbiev. And I just feel I didn't see anything new in the sense of where I can see him challenging at the elite level. But, in terms of where he's at, he's still going to be a very difficult guy for the guys in and around that mix who are coming up to fight. I would say maybe, just maybe, you put him in with David Benavidez, because obviously, there is a certain rematch that needs to be addressed in a trilogy. We'll get into that. But I think that's where they're at right now at the moment.
And then how did Buatsi let this slip?
Buatsi, he has a very interesting style, and I feel like he sells himself short. I feel like he has a lot more tools than he's actually using, and he seems to be fighting, in his last few fights at least, one particular kind of style. Obviously, against a taller man, you want to close the distance and you want to be in the clinch. But when he disengages, he's very defensively irresponsible, and he gets caught with a lot of shots. And so he'll be in the clinch. He'll throw some good shots. He'll work the body, etc. But then it's almost like he's waiting for the opponent to see what they're going to do next before he does anything, and he doesn't really necessarily take a step back or anything. And he got caught with some beautiful uppercut hook combinations or some lead hooks. Even at some point, Callum Smith was catching him with like a double hook, and he was taking some beatings. So for someone like Buatsi, he's had a very inactive career in the program. So, for instance, but he's had a lot of spars and he's done a lot of work. So he could potentially be going down the route of taking like a Joe Joyce, who is just taking a bit more damage than necessary, and that may actually shorten his career. So hopefully he can kind of rebuild, come back from this and go again. But yeah, man.
Bro, this was a great fight. Zhang versus Caballero. Great performance from Caballero, but he managed to stop Zhang. Where do you rank him, and what's next for Zhang?
Hey, Big Bang Zhang got banged.
No diddy.
He got banged. Listen, Agit Caballero, always rated him. He is the giant slayer, and man, he does it with beautiful body work. The same way he mashed up Makhmudov, he mashed up Zhang. And he goes to the body, he's relentless. He got dropped, he took a shot similar to, we all know that Zhang can bang. He did the same thing to Joseph Parker. But unfortunately, a bit too old, 41 now, going 42. You're looking at, this being, well, not even being the tail end. It's pretty much said that Zhang can't compete with the younger guys. And Agit Caballero, seasoned, experienced, very technical. He knows how he put the pressure on in Zhang's face, and Zhang just couldn't. He was gassing by the fourth round. So listen, it was a great performance. I think for Agit Caballero, he's in a mix of a plethora of heavyweight contenders. He's gonna have to fight another one again. And who would I put him in with? I'd probably put him in with a Lawrence Okoli, or maybe even a matchup with a certain Moses Atuma, who's been hyped up. That might be a good fight, a good test to see where they're at if they really want him to pursue for a heavyweight title. But Agit Caballero, he's a danger man, and I think he's gonna cause a lot of problems for a lot of heavyweights, particularly with his conditioning.
Ortiz and Madrimov, crazy fight. What do you think about that?
Hey, banging fight. Classic Mexican style from Ortiz versus, Madrimov's his almost Russian Soviet style-esque. He does train with Dmitry Bivol, so it's no secret. And you know what, he came out, he was moving, but you can't necessarily win fights with the movement alone, you know. And Virgil Ortiz, what was impressive about him, because this was his toughest test to date, up at 154 pounds. He was very patient. First few rounds initially, he struggled to kind of find the range, cover the distance and shut Madrimov down, but Madrimov couldn't move all night. And Virgil Ortiz, you know, he got in, he started to connect his shots. Madrimov, of course, slowed down. And he took it on a very, you know, definitive decision. It was some really good work from Virgil Ortiz Jr. Obviously, he retains his belt. And now it's going to be interesting to see what's next for him at 154 pounds. You know, does he go on to fight one of the other champions? And I think he's kind of really cemented himself and he's really arrived at this stage, and it's good to see. Madrimov, there's talks of him having bronchitis, being ill, etc., whatnot, leading up into the fight. But, you know, I just think that style, particularly against Crawford, we saw it. If you're moving on the back foot a lot, initially, like for instance in the first Bivol fight, when you're backing up a lot and you're not necessarily closing the fight strong, you're likely to lose the fight. And I think that's what we saw there.
Anthony, Adames versus Shiraz. Talk to me.
What is there to talk about? Absolutely, you know, terrible decision, controversial draw, in my opinion. I felt Adames won that fight. Shiraz, this was his moment. This was meant to be his coming out party.
What was Turkey talking to Shiraz about? Was it Shiraz that he said 2-point deduction when he was in the corner of the ring?
So there was a few warnings that, you know, the referee
why was it him to go around and say 2 points, 2 points?
Because he is a fan favorite. You know, he is an ambassador of Riyadh season, and maybe that kind of brought him some favors with this decision. But you know, for me, Adames clearly won that fight. Hamza Shiraz, I think he froze in the moment, and it just kind of shows maybe potentially this might be a case of either Hamza Shiraz struggling at boiling down at the weight, or it could be a case of, you know, Hamza Shiraz in the sense of where, you know, he froze at the occasion and we've kind of seen his level. But one thing, he did come out afterwards and say that he broke his hand. Potentially, you know, that may be a reason why his output, because his output significantly, you know, well, not that his output was phenomenal, but he just didn't really throw much in the latter stages of the fight. And Adames came on stronger, and for me, should have been the rightful winner. Obviously, he still retains his title with a draw, but, you know, I think the next step for these guys is that they run it back and we get a clear, decisive winner between the two. But for me, I think we did have that. But, you know, maybe it just pays to be an ambassador of Riyadh season. Who knows? We'll see. Cool.
Anthony Stevenson versus Padley. Talk to me. What happened there?
Man, Shakur, the quote-unquote, as Eddie Hearn likes to say, future star of boxing, future pound for pound, future undisputed, etc., whatnot. Listen, Padley, 4 days notice, you know, levels below, gotta do better than that. Shakur, yes, he did get the stoppage eventually in round 8. I think if that was Tank or anyone else, I think they would have got him out of there in 4 rounds. You know, like Shakur was talking about belt to ass. He was under pressure to get the stoppage, and yes, he did get it, but I just feel in looking at it in comparison, man, you can't talk to me about Shakur beating Tank because he just lacks that power and that respect. And I feel that, you know, potentially Padley, without a camp, he came straight out of the, you know, out of the workshop, straight in the plane, straight into the ring. So, you know, had he had a full camp where he'd had conditioning, that might have gone 12 rounds. So Shakur, for me, has got a lot to live up to. I love his style. I think he's phenomenal. I just think he lacks the power to gain the respect. And, you know, his style is suited for me to the amateur and Olympic point scoring system. And I think if he comes up against a heavy hitter, he's going to be found out soon. But I want to see him in a big fight next because, you know, it's time. We don't want to see these kind of fights. We don't want to see the Padleys. We don't want to see I can't remember his last opponent. He doesn't have a good rep back in the States in terms of, you know, his last fight, he was booed heavily, criticized heavily. So we want to see, you know, some exciting fights, and we want to see the right kind of performances from Shakur. So time is ticking.
Now the big boy fight, Parker versus Bivol. 2 rounds. Do you think he did himself a disservice? And as Eddie Hearn said, he shouldn't have taken that fight in such short notice because just everything was against him.
That was a big boy fight for a few reasons. It was mainly a big boy fight because Bivol was 315 pounds. So he was a big boy. You know, he was undertrained, underprepared, and, you know, he took a gamble, he took a risk. I understand why he did it. You know, boxing, politics, you know, this is a case of Queensbury, Matchroom, particularly Queensbury, you know, having a monopoly over the heavyweight division at the moment. And Bicoli, one of the more avoided heavyweights, you know, wasn't invited to the party. They gave him an offer, some will say a lowball offer, but he saw it as an opportunity to kind of arrive. He may have not got that opportunity anytime soon with the likes of Dubois, Parker, Usyk, all potentially tied up for the future. So he took a gamble, but against a sharp, prepared Joseph Parker who was preparing to fight death himself in Daniel Dubois, you know, he took a gamble and he got knocked out. No shame in it. It's just a shame that, you know, obviously he's going to serve like a 3 to 6 month suspension for health reasons. Obviously, it was a very concussive kind of blow. It was to the top of the head, scrambled his equilibrium. Guy went down like Godzilla on a bad night out. So you know, so it's going to be a bit of a way back for him. It's going to be a hit for Boxer. I know they were excited. They were thinking that they were going to, you know, in the words of Conor McGregor, red panty night, but it wasn't to be. So they got to stick to brown panties wearing granny knickers because it's going to be a long road back for them before they see themselves in that top heavyweight division. Now, it's going to be closed off with the big hitters. But listen, Joseph Parker, take nothing away from him. It tells us nothing really. You know, it tells us that, you know, Joseph Parker, he is, you know, legit. He is again another giant slayer. He's the guy that's taken out the big hitters. This is his first stoppage for a while now. He did beat obviously the bronze bomber Deontay Wilder and Zhang, and now he takes another scalp in Bicoli. But it still doesn't really tell us how he's going to rank. So I still really would like to see Joseph Parker versus Daniel Dubois, rather than throwing Daniel Dubois in with Alexander Usyk next, which is what I'm hearing. So, you know, we'll see. But yeah, good night. Good night for Parker.
What is next for Joseph Parker?
Yeah, like I said, you know, it's going to be interesting. I'm hearing Usyk and Dubois. I hope that's not the case. I think, you know, Dubois and Parker should be next. I think Parker has earned that opportunity. I think he deserves it. I think he's in shape. I think he's ready to go again. He took no damage against a big, you know, puncher, essentially. 1 or 2 blows, but he handled it well. But I think he needs his opportunity. So he needs Daniel Dubois next, and I think he should be campaigning for that. I know obviously he's got a good relationship with Frank Warren and Queensbury, with Spencer Brown as his manager, and you know, it's going to be a case of where, you know, if Dubois is scheduled for Usyk, they're going to push that next. So, you know, it's going to be hard to see, but we will stay tuned and we will follow that very closely.
The last crescendo, Beterbiev versus Bivol. Did you see Bivol win as clear-cut as everyone else made out to be, or was it closer than most people thought?
So, listen, I'm hearing words like demolished, clear one-sided victory. Absolutely not. Phenomenal, high level. Was Bivol the rightful winner? Yes, marginally. I think it was very close. But for me, that is not how a one-sided victory or an ass whooping or belt to ass or, you know, or demolishing looks like. You know, we've had examples of demolishing. Canelo got demolished in that fight against Dimitri Bivol. Just the domination, the sheer domination, the pressure, the will. This was a case of a tale of two halves of the fight. Just there was things that Bivol did in this fight better than he did at the first fight, and that's what kind of swayed me to agree reluctantly with the decision. Listen, I am a fan of the Bivol style. I'm a fan of Bivol, but you know, I still struggle to see him being imposing and dominant in this light heavyweight division with some of the threats up and coming. One thing that I feel that won him this fight is, I think age started to show itself in this fight for Artur Beterbiev. You look at the exchanges, you know, Bivol, what he did great on this time is after, you know, Beterbiev got something off, he'd quickly respond with a jab, body, and he'd finish. He'd have like 2, 3, 4 more, as he said, more. What are you gonna do? More. He did a lot more in this fight, and that's what won him some of those close rounds. But as the fight went through, phenomenal fight. You had Beterbiev in there. First two rounds, I gave him to Bivol. Marginal, arguable round number 2. Could have gone either way, or it could have been a 10-10 and even round. But from rounds 3 to about rounds 5, or 6 even, Beterbiev was on a mission, hunting him down. He was going to the body earlier, many of the things that we anticipated, you know, that nice hooking body to the shot to the body. He was going in venomous, stabbing the body, and I thought this was going to be the case of Bivol. He looked like he started to slow down. But you know what I feel like Bivol did? I feel like he did a bit of rope-a-dope. He said, all right, I'm going to come in, I'm going to try and take first 2 rounds. I'm going to look flat-footed like I can't move, or maybe the inflammation that he's talking about was real, and he just kind of saved himself for the later rounds. But he did a bit of rope-a-dope, and in doing so, he saved himself for the latter portions. Beterbiev used a lot more energy in the earlier stages of the fight, which meant that Bivol was actually sharper towards the end of the fight, and he was able to land 2, 3, 4 punches after the exchanges to steal some of the points to win the rounds. But in terms of one-sided, it wasn't close. A masterclass, yes. Stellar performance from the two, 100%. It's 1-1. We need to run it back. We need a trilogy. It wasn't a demolishment. I don't want to hear about I need to rest my back, inflammation, all of this business, because save that same energy for when you lost the first fight. And, you know, and yeah.
But I'm hearing conflicting views on the rematch. What's that about?
Yeah, so conflicting views in the sense of where, you know, there's talks of potentially Canelo now, they're throwing Benavidez's name in there. Yes, they're all viable fights, you know, no one's going to argue about those fights, but there is unfinished business. You look at this fight, Beterbiev towards the end of the fight looked like he could have gone more rounds as well. So I feel like, you know, and I know they say it's not necessarily the case because it is boxing and a point scoring system, but to win the championship, to win the title, you have to beat the championship. And I didn't feel like he beat the will and he beat the hunger and the tenacity out of Beterbiev. I felt like there was still more for Beterbiev to give. Whether or not he can win it or not is another thing. I think age is starting to show itself now, and I think that he's just like they've got it sussed in terms of the output with Bivol, and if Bivol can maintain that output, you know, likely he's going to get the same result. But there's always the chance that he could get knocked out or he could get stopped. But man, respect to Bivol. The guy's tough as nails, man. Like honestly, like he impressed me in the first fight, impressed me in the second fight. You know, the guy backed up less. He refused to be backed up. You know, he was a bit more defiant in this fight, and that's what got him the decision. Because the questions were, could he stay in there? Could he throw exchanges and open himself up and be a bit more dangerous and take, you know, and be at risk, susceptible to being caught? And he did that. And man, props, kudos to him. Undisputed championship, well deserved. But I want to see number 3.